Mic check, mic check. 1, 2, 3. Well, hello and welcome back to Classic Vintage Races, this time at round 14 in 1933, and this time we're at Helsinki, where we're going to be racing at Eläintarhanajot, which is going to be a very challenging race indeed. This circuit is bear with me. This race is going to take place on a kind of a street circuit almost. It's going to be quite tight, quite twisty, quite different to some of the rounds that we've had coming before this one. And it's going to be interesting to see how many drivers can make it through to the end of this round. It's a short, twisty, extremely bumpy city track in Helsinki, and it requires constant concentration from the drivers. The sidewalks can throw the cars off balance instantly, and the trees and the hay bales are going to be very unforgiving, which could lead to some significant damage for drivers who aren't on their game. And it could be a quick end to a lot of cars if they pick up a significant amount of damage. Of note for this round is that it's the first one that I can recall, at least in the season so far, where the weather is looking like it might be rainy. A little bit of rain potentially earlier in the day, leading into finer weather towards the latter half of the race. So the conditions could be really challenging if we do see a bit of that rain popping up. It's going to be a standing start, and it's going to be an interesting format this weekend. So rather than the normal kind of qualifying and race format, this is actually going to be based on two separate heats of 15 laps each, and then the top 8 from both of those will advance through to the final, which is a 50-lap race. So quite a different setup, and the grid into the race is going to be according to the heat positions. So it could be quite interesting to see how that plays out today. So here's the heat setup that we just mentioned there. So heat 1 has some familiar names, so Heitinen, Withoff, Duatilla, Tolonen, and then in heat 2 you've got Peltonen, Nurmi and Korkailski. So it's going to be two separate heats, as I mentioned. We'll go through each of those sequentially. So we'll do the first one, then move on to the second one, and then that will lead into the final race, which is a 50-lap race. And it's going to be an interesting one. So watch out for all involved. Wish them luck, and pray that the rain doesn't arrive. I'm also praying that the rain doesn't arrive purely because when it does, my GPU usage tends to get to 100%. And yes, it could be interesting. Hopefully that doesn't cause any issues in terms of stream quality, but I'll do my best to keep my eye on that and keep my fingers crossed. And hello everyone in chat. Good to see you all here. Files, Lafredge, welcome. And everyone else as well. I'm sure I'll get to know you all throughout the course of the race. We've got about a minute and a half until the beginning of the first heat, and that's going to be Heitinen, Withoff, Duatilla, Tolonen, La, Hallen, Cleo, Darling, Pereira, and Lubrimiski. Now there has been a slight delay to the racing starting today, and that is because when I logged into the server, it turned out that my pit box, along with a few other drivers, was in the middle of the road, which would probably make for some challenging racing for drivers who weren't expecting an additional chicane or 3 on the start-finish straight. So Tolonen has been doing a great job of just getting that fixed up, and the track has been adjusted. And thankfully, we are now ready to get back onto the main event, which is the racing this evening, and Heat 1 will be kicking off very soon. I think this is the camera that I'm going to go with. And low indeed. No, it's a new one for me as well, Viles, so it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. Here we go, the lights are up, engines and revving. And away we go, Heat 1 is now underway. One of the cars at the back getting off to a very slow start indeed. But at the moment it's Heitinen leading the pack with you Attila and Withoft in hot pursuit. And into the first of the corners. Quite a narrow track, and the hay bales in the trees, as I mentioned earlier on, will be very unforgiving, so drivers will have to be very, very cautious not to make any contact with the environment, otherwise that will be a very quick way to wrap up the race. And unlike some of the previous rounds where we've had long straights and quite open tracks, this is a stark contrast with very twisty, tight conditions. You can see that if the rain does visit during these heats or the main race, we're going to see some very challenging conditions for the drivers indeed. Take a look from the driver's perspective, if I can just find an appropriate view. Then yes, very narrow indeed, not much room to play with. There's a curb on the right hand side which is easily going to unsettle the car. And on the left hand side you can see the conditions are, what, a very short trip before you hit the fence. Let's put it that way. A couple of blind corners there as well, so drivers have to be cautious of drivers in front of them potentially getting into trouble around some of these blind corners and not being able to see that before you arrive at it yourself. At the moment Heitinen has opened up a 2-second gap already, but at the moment La and Hallin are starting to close in on one another. This may be where our first battle in Heat 1 starts to unfold. Looks like Lubramiski is off to a poor start. They're still in the pits. And I think it was Clio in the little car that I've forgotten the name of. So yeah, the Amel car, that's the one. They're off to a slow start. They were the one at the back of the grid who didn't get off to a flying start, and I think they may be the first driver at risk of being overtaken or lapped. Our race leader, Heitinen, now 3 seconds clear of the grid. Looks to be off to a strong start here, at least from a qualifying perspective. But there are a few more laps to go, and the risk of damage is indeed a constant threat. Sliding the car through the corners despite the narrowness. You can imagine that overtaking here is going to be quite a challenge for the drivers, and that will be something that they'll be very conscious of, so qualifying well is going to be a key consideration here. Let's go back to La and Hallin and let's see whether the battle here for 4th place is unfolding. Does look like La has the straight line speed advantage, acceleration definitely helping them on the straights there. Hallin in the Talbot seems to be making up the difference in the corners. And you can see already that they're starting to close in on La despite the big gap that they left on the straight. That corner there in particular is going to be a bit of a challenge. Ooh, struggling to slow down, and that's contact. And they're going side by side on a track which is very narrow indeed. A little bit of contact there between Hallin and La has allowed Tolnin to close in. And Tolnin is in the Bugatti. Looks like La just took a little bit of a trip onto the grass there, but managed to recover without significant damage. And now it's Tolnin's opportunity to put a bit of speed down here. It'll be interesting now because La has the straight line speed, whereas Hallin has it in the corners. So can they catch up to Hallin before T1? Looks like they've closed the gap somewhat, but now Hallin will be able to open the gap back up again in the corners. It's an interesting fact in chat there. So Ferrari ran the Alfa team in the 1930s. Ferrari was a race team before they became a manufacturer. I didn't actually know that. So no sign of rain just yet. Tollin still 0.4 of a second behind. Now what I'm not entirely clear on is that the driver briefing notes I've been provided with say that the heats will be 15 laps each and the top 8 from both will advance to the 50-lap final. Now there's only 8 drivers in this heat. So does that mean that everyone is going through? Tollin struggling to catch up to La at the moment, at least on the straights. Catching a bit of grass here and there, which is always risky. And one thing to mention is that the 1932 Alfa Romero P3 is definitely the fastest car on the grid today, but it's a very oversteery vehicle, and if the drivers have been brave enough to take it, they will be able to reap the rewards of its speed, but they will also kind of have to walk the razor's edge with regards to the oversteer. And on a circuit like this today, that will be a key consideration. So you can see some of the drivers haven't opted for the Alfa, probably because they think it's a more stable option to go with something else. Kwiatkowski, Uatila and Tollin are all in the Bugatti, which is more stable but still agile on the twisty track, so they might find themselves finishing the race, whereas some of the Alphas might find it a little bit more challenging. Okay, thank you, Haley, that is good to know. Ooh, and there's one of the Alphas spinning out, and Tollin gets caught up in the incident as well. So that's number 38, which is La. And Tollin also catches a bit of damage there as a result. Sounds like the engine's died. But La's back out and on the track and underway. Do I see a flat? Looks like the front left for Tollin is a little bit flat. We'll have to see whether that's going to be the end of Tollin's race, whether they can continue. So Cleo is currently going toe-to-toe with Alan, but I do believe that Cleo is lapped, as is La, who was in the pit lane but now has just exited. It looks like La's managed to repair their damage. Tollin still unable to move, but the looks of it, engine's off. Front left tyre seems to be flat. Tantalisingly close to the pit lane, which is just dead ahead. The tyre's been repaired, and I believe they'll be able to get the engine running. Sounds like it's back on. Yep, and they're off. So Tollin's back out and under power, but finds themselves in 7th place. Lubramiski, of course, in the pits with no driver in the car, so technically they're going to go through, but they haven't actually finished the race. Meanwhile, Heitinen, our race leader, 10.9 seconds clear of the field at this stage in the Alpha, and with only 5 laps left to go, subject to no damage, I think they'll be in a pretty good spot here. it's probably worth mentioning a little bit about some of the information from the prior round last month. So that was the Indianapolis. And we had quite a lot of contact in that race, so there has been a bit of damage. Clio picked up a 20,000 credit fine for a crash over 150 kilometers an hour and one for a 50 kilometer an hour. Uatilla also picked up a 20,000 credits fine for 2 crashes over 100 kilometers. Darling received a 15,000, as did Kai Severston, both for a 50 and 100 kilometer an hour respectively, and Heitinen almost off the track there. Von Rosen, Tolnin and Lafrege all picked up a 10,000 credit fine for varying speed incidents. Withoft and Pereira on a 5,000 credit fine for 50 kilometer hours apiece, and then that led to the following drivers got a penalty as well. So Lazaro, 5,000 credits for causing an accident. Pereira, 5,000 credits for not slowing down when drivers crashed ahead and causing an accident. Darling for the same thing, and Lafrege, 5,000 credits for causing an accident. And then Severston, S. Smith and Pereira failed to finish, so they had a DNF, and that led to no race rewards at all. And Severston actually ended up being in debt, so they've had to sell their car and get a cheaper one. So Lafrege is hoping for good results today to reline his pockets. So lap 12 of 15 for heat number 1. And there hasn't been a huge amount of changing of positions in this heat. Hopefully that's not an indication of the race to come, but here's the ML car. And at least the start-finish straight affords the drivers a little bit of a safe spot to overtake. That's good to hear, Lafrege. Hopefully you don't have to do the walk of shame barefoot then. So, Heitinen about to kick off penultimate lap. Meanwhile, everyone else is quite spread out already, and multiple tens of seconds between the drivers. But it looks like Uatilla in the Bugatti on for a solid P2 here. Ooh, catching a little bit of the curb there actually. So, as I mentioned earlier on, those raised curbs which surround the track in certain parts do definitely run the risk of upsetting the car stability. And then if you hit one of those at any general momentum, you're probably going to find yourself launching yourself off track. So definitely one to watch. At the very least, it might lead to a spin. Here's the ML car again, driven by Clio. Clio's been sticking with the ML car for some time now, even though it does lack some of the speed qualities required to be competitive in the grid currently. We'll be driving a T35C in Heat 2. Looking forward to it, Haley. Is that Chungus that you've brought back? So last lap for Heitenen, and they're about to cross the line, and they have completed heat number 1 in first place with Uatilla on track to finish up with a P2. Looks like Lars picked up P5. Here comes Uatilla. And it looks like Withoft will be picking up the final spot on the podium for heat number 1. Bingus 2 Evo. Fantastic. Chungus 1 was the Bentley, that's the one. There will always be a soft spot in my heart for Chungus 1. So, Withoft picks up P3. Hallin looks to be bringing it home for a P4 with what's remaining of their car. They've got a rear left puncture. And they're only slightly on fire, which is always a nice sight to see. And Hallin brings it home for the P4 finish. There we have it. Heat number 1 has been completed. Let's move over now to heat number 2. I'll bring back up the starting grid so you can see second heat, which in theory should have 10 drivers. And if there's more than 8, then 2 of those drivers won't be making it through to the final race. So I just had a message from Tolnen, who said that his race was over a little bit too soon. Crashed with La that we watched on the stream, and then spinned and lost the tyre and the cooling. And then after the tyre change, he was trying to adjust his fuel mix and missed his braking point and ended up on his roof. So hopefully that still means he qualifies, because he technically finished in the top 8, but we'll have to see. So we've got a couple of minutes now until heat number 2 is underway. And I assume that means I need to leave the server. So give me 2 seconds, I'll just bring the standings, right, the starting grid back up. So just waiting for Tolnen to give me the nod to rejoin. Then we'll be getting heat number 2 underway. So just joining back in. So here we are, back on the grid. We've got a 4-minute practice session before we get on with the main event. So here we are with Nermi, one of the favourites for today. And Lafredge, who was in chat a few moments ago, is now on the grid. In a very, very lovely Bugatti, which is featuring a large amount of very affectionately placed rust. So we do have 9 drivers in the heat, so one of these drivers won't be qualifying in the top 8. Ooh, looks like Lafredge might be walking home barefoot. And they've returned to the pits. Thankfully that was in the practice session and not in the actual heat. Lazzaro here in their very nicely painted Maserati. So just 1 more minute left on the practice session, then heat number 2 will be underway, and then we'll see who qualifies for the final 50-lap race. Relatively short circuit, so the 50-lap race won't take too long to complete. And we've got F. Mias here in the original old school Bugatti. Brave choice. Not the TV car. I like that. there's Korkiakowski in the number 28 Bugatti. They are taking a little bit of a trip off into the vegetation. Well, there we have it. Practice is completed. We'll be starting the 15 minutes heat number 2 in a second. Ah, CVR official in the chat. Extolling the virtues of a T51. So with heat number 2 about to begin, let's see what our contenders can do on the grid today. Got 10 drivers, that's the full lineup from heat number 2's attendees. Unfortunately that does mean that 2 of these drivers won't be finishing, won't be qualifying for the final 50 lap race, so let's hope that we don't have anyone kind of die off in an unfortunate accident. Four and a half minutes to go. Not entirely sure why the trees seem to be flickering. I also love the exceptionally large number of telephone lines lining the track. Interesting how the lineup here is 3 wide right off the bat, so it's going to be quite a tight start. Got Nurmi and Peltonen, teammates there of course, in the Alphas. Korkiakowski in the Bugatti. So nice to see a little bit of variation there on the front line. Thank you, the Zozo. Much appreciated. I think we're looking at just like a minute or so left to go. I think that's the correct camera angle. Let's go with that. Ah, so supporting Lafrege. Well, I've been reliably informed that if they don't finish well in this race, they're walking home barefoot. So that's the 314 Revival team. Yeah, you definitely should. It's a good championship. Lots of good drivers, very well organised. Here we go, lights are up. Engines are revving. And we're off. Looks like, ooh, Lazaro in the background there just had to go round the pole at the beginning. I'm not sure why they had to do that, but that's a very interesting start to the race. Pelton and Nurmi off to a good start, but let's take a look in the middle of the grid here where things seem to be a little bit more exciting. We've got Lazaro, Crozet, who I've been informed that I'm saying their name wrong, but I've been told I cannot stop saying their name wrong now. So Crozet in P9 with Hayley Smith in P7, Lafrege, the Revival driver, in the 314 Bugatti, currently running P8, which is the final spot to qualify. So anyone below P8 at the end of this heat will not be going through to the final round. But so far so good. Our grid is off to a good start here, no major incidents, and even Lazaro with their interesting start to the race seems to have got through without too much issue, running in P5 currently. Looks like Hayley Smith is on track for a little bit of a battle here, and they are driving the Bingus 2 Evo. I stand corrected, couldn't see the Evo there behind the wheel. But Hayley Smith sliding the Bugatti as they come round to the final corner, trying to pull up alongside Crozet as they head down to T1. But I don't think they've quite had the power there to get alongside, given they are both driving the same Bugatti. It's going to come down to driver skill more so than difference in hardware. And Smith just sitting on the rear end of Crozet here as they head round another lap. Starting to drop back a little bit now to a 0.5 gap, but coming back strong potentially as they seem to find a little bit of time here in the last few corners. Again, having to be very careful not to push the car too hard because that can lead to a very rapid unscheduled disassembly, as we saw with Tolan in heat number 1. So Hayley Smith about 0.9 of a second now behind Crozet, and that's leading to a slightly bigger gap. Meanwhile, Lafrege fighting for P8 now, with Ledoux just starting to close in a little bit there, got within a 0.5 of a second gap Meanwhile, at the front, our two White Arrow drivers, Marcus Peltonen and Nurmi, are separated by half a second. Of course, both being teammates, they will be very cautious not to try and take each other out, so I'm sure if there is an overtake, it will be done very, very delicately. Meanwhile, Ledoux has got through to P8, and that's left Lafrege in P9. Quite a big gap there, so I think there's been a little bit of an issue for Lafrege, which they're going to have to try and come back from. Doesn't seem to be a flat tyre, but the car does seem to be a little bit more unstable by the way that it's being driven. Let's see whether Lafrege is going to be falling a bit further back. 4.2, 4.4 seconds. I think there's something definitely wrong. Coming up to the pit lane now, I don't presume they're going to be pitting because you wouldn't really have the time. They're going to have to try and persevere and hope that one of the drivers ahead has a unfortunate accident. Meanwhile, Haley Smith manages to outbrake Rosette and gets through to P6. And now the Bingus 2 Evo is through. Let's see whether they can extend that lead at all. And yes, it is very bumpy on the track, as you can see the cars jumping their way around. 5 laps of our 15 lap heat are now complete. And Marcus Peltonen opening up a 1.3 second gap to Nurmi. So we've had F. Megias come in to the pit lane in their old school Bugatti. I think that might be them done. Here comes Lafrege, 6.6 seconds behind Ledoux at this point, so I'm not sure Lafrege's comment in chat earlier on is going to be aging particularly well, and by their own admission they may be walking home barefoot. At the front, Nurmi has closed in a little bit on their teammate Peltonen, but as yet isn't in a position to overtake. Although I presume for safety reasons they probably wouldn't even attempt to do an overtake here, given their team position is P1 and P2. But I might be mistaken. In the background you can hear the whine of a supercharger by the sounds of it, and that's Korkiakowski, who did just almost take a little bit of a trip off into the wilderness there. Ooh, where's Lafrege? Oh my god. So, Lafrege has a slightly scenic route here, just working their way through. Oh my god, where are they? Careful. Now, I think they have got a rear flat tyre, and that is bad news for Lafrege. I think this might be game over for the Revival team. Here comes Bingus 2 Evo. They shoot past. So unfortunately, I think that does seal the fate of the Revival team in the 314 Bugatti. Unless another driver has a stunning misfortune, I think Lafrege may be unable to come back from this. Let's see, yeah, they're coming into the pit lane for repairs. There's Ledoux, so they're already a lap down by this point. Very unfortunate for Lafrege. Oh, they've managed to basically repair the tyre by doing a stop and go kind of thing, so they're back out and running. So our front runners, Peltonen and Nurmi, separated by half a second. Really setting the tone at the front for the racing here. This is how quick it can be done. Kwiatkowski managing to avoid a trip off into the bushes, but then almost decides to do the same thing into the hay bales. So I'm going to stop talking about what might happen to Kwiatkowski, because I seem to be giving them a very good case of the commentator's curse here. Lefrage completes another lap. We spent a bit of time with Jay Lemure here in the number 33 Delage. Not very many Delages out on the circuit today. I must say that the paint jobs are rather lovely on these cars. Well, I think Kwiatkowski's been taking a leaf out of Lefrage's book there and deciding to do a bit of bird watching, maybe explore the wilderness. Pick some wild mushrooms whilst you're racing, why not? You can see there Jay Lemure just catching a little bit of that raised curb, which I suspect is a risk of puncture if you hit it too hard. So unfortunately Lefrage has retired to the pits and seems to have exited the vehicle, which is a shame. Here's Lazaro, who had a very exciting start to the heat, having to drive through the pit lane to avoid contact, I think it was. And I think they're in the only Maserati on the circuit today. Meanwhile at the front, Peltonen and Nurmi still holding steady. And F. McGears has now assumed 9th position because they've overtaken Lefrage in the pits. Having to just nip out of the way there, but almost pushing Nurmi off the track there, and that was a little bit risky. That's cost Nurmi about a second on their teammate Peltonen there. Of course, Peltonen and Nurmi are in the Alpha, which is, as I mentioned earlier on, quite a handful, but they seem to have found a way to tame the beast. There's 3 more laps to go in heat number 2. Ooh, we've got Ledoux with a flat tyre. It's a shame that Lefrage retired, because this might mean that they could have overtaken Ledoux. Although F. McGears is 3 laps down, I don't think there's 3 laps left in this race, potentially. With the fact that Peltonen will be starting lap 13 very shortly. And there was McGears, just going past in the old Bugatti. Peltonen and Nurmi just kicking off lap 13. So just another couple of laps to go and we'll be concluding heat number 2. Ooh, so Korkioski, sorry, has just taken a bit of a spin off into the trees and has lost both left wheels and seems to be attempting to repair. Ledoux, who had the flat tyre earlier on, is back out on the track as well, so this is bad news for Korkioski, who now needs to try and repair the vehicle, get it back underway without being lapped by Ledoux. Well, technically it's fine as long as they don't get lapped by F. McGears, who will then drop them out of P8 and into P9. But this is the risk that you have of coming off the track here. So Ledoux just coming up and presumably not too far off overtaking Korkioski. There's Peltonen and Nurmi just coming through. Korkioski still on the side of the road here in the number 28 Bugatti, both left-hand side tyres still removed from their rims fully, so this is going to be quite a substantial repair job. There's Ledoux, and that drops Korkioski down to P8. So they now need to finish the race. So Korkioski is finally going to finish the race in P8 because F. McGears has now crossed the finish line, and that's led to a P9 finish for McGears, which is unfortunate given Korkioski can't seem to move right now. But Marcus Peltonen finishing the heat in P1, taking a little bit of a trip off road now, apparently, joined by their teammate Nurmi. And you've got Jaylee Moore finishing in P3 with Alazaro in P4, Crozet in P5, Haley Smith in the Bingus 2 Evo picks up P6, Ledoux grabs the P7 spot, and Korkioski, I mean, I assume they need to cross the line, otherwise they haven't technically finished, but as yet have been unable to repair the vehicle. So Tolnan, maybe a little bit of a advice from yourself. What does this mean from a finishing position? Technically, it says Korkioski's in P8, but they haven't technically crossed the line. McGears is in P9 and has finished, but I would assume, unless Korkioski can cross the line, they haven't actually finished the race. Unless we are still waiting for... There we go, that's the front left repaired. Will that mean they can get underway? They are trying to go uphill, which we've seen be a challenge for these cars in the past. I guess I have to try and cross the line before the race timer ends, as in the overtime kind of bit which is added in. But they are at possibly the worst part of the track for this to have happened. A slight uphill incline. Ah, and there we go. So I think that's a little bit up in the air. I'm going to have to defer to Tolnin to tell me whether that's a P8 finish or a P9 finish for Kwiatkowski. So with Heat 2 now completed, we'll be moving through to the final stage of today's racing, which is the main event, the 50-lap main race, which the qualifying drivers from Heat number 1 and 2 will go through to complete. And that will give us a few more minutes. I'll have to wait for the nod from Colin to jump into that session. But that should then get us underway for the main piece of racing this evening. So I just brought back up the heats there so you can see who went into Heat 1 and 2. Unfortunately, I don't have one of these for the qualifying positions out of those heats, but we have covered that in quite a lot of detail in the heats so far. Now, weather is going to be a key consideration. And we didn't see any weather in the heats, so no rain, but there may be some in the main event, so let's see what's in store for us. But Tolan has just advised that he's just sorting out the results for the final, and then we'll get that underway. Waiting for the nod to join in. Suffered from LS in the heat. Now if I choose the SH and the rain this time, I'll never forget myself. Yeah, it's always tricky trying to work out tyre strategy when you've got weather involved. Never an easy one to deal with. Apologies for the delay in action. We're just waiting for this server to get back online, and then we'll be jumping back on for the final race. I haven't heard anything from Tolnan just yet. I assume he is feverishly setting up the server with the results from the heats 1 and 2. Hopefully we can get back on track relatively soon. Okay, good news everyone. I've been advised the server is up, so I'm going to go ahead and jump back in. So the final grid for this race is going to be Heitinen, Peltonen, Uatila, Nurmi, Withoft, Lemure, Hallin, Lazaro, La, Rosette, Leo, Smith, Tolnan, Renaud, Lubomirski, Korkiakowski, and that concludes the lineup. So I assume that means that Korkiakowski did finish P8 despite the fact that they had their accidents and didn't cross the line. But we are out here in a short practice session, 5.5 minutes before we get back on with the racing here. But that is good news. We are back on track and ready to go into the final race. So just 2.5 minutes left on the practice session, and then we'll get into the main 50-lap race. Ooh, and there's a bit of contact up ahead between Cleo and Tolnan. Yes, it was. Both drivers back in the pits. So based on the heats, I think Peltonen and Nurmi are definitely ones to watch, but as ever, anything can happen in a race like this, and with 50 trips round a circuit of this nature, that's 50 times you can make a mistake. And as we've seen, the mistakes here can be very costly indeed. So Jelly Muir in the number 33 Delage. Definitely going to get a bit of pace out of the Delage here today. 102.538. Expecting Peltonen to appear in the tops 2 relatively soon, however. There's Jay Lemure getting a little bit caught out and actually makes a bit of a dramatic entry into the pit lane there. I've seen that one before. With Oft in the number 38 Alpha as well. Oh, in the background that looks like Ledoux. Well, actually no, it's Heitinen as well, so a lot of drivers getting caught out here. That's a front right and rear left puncture for Heitinen. Thankfully, again in the practice session and not in the race. The Amel car never fails to put a smile on my face. That just leaves Hayley Smith in the Bingus 2 Evo to finish up their lap. And there we have it, 1.5 minutes to go until we get underway with the final race, which will be 50 laps. Sounds good, Viles. So Nurmi and Peltonen as expected, P1 and 2. Jelly Muir in the Delage picks up the 3rd spot. Withoft will be starting in 4th, Uatilla in 5th, Lazaro in 6th place, Hayley Smith in P7, Rosette in P8, Ledoux in P9, Cleo in P10, and then you've got Heitinen, La and Tolnen bringing up the rear, but last but not least is Korkiakowski. So just 4 minutes to go. So it's a 50 lap race. It should be about 50 minutes in total, 55 at the top end, based on the lap times. You see Nurmi there, just almost cracking the 59-second territory, but 1 minute 0.7 is the current bar to beat. Interestingly, it looks like we've got one of the drivers in the pit lane there, which I don't think that car belongs to anyone who's actually in the session though. I think we're about ready to go here for the beginning of our final race this evening. It's lights up, engines are revving, and away we go. Strong start for our front runners here in the Alphas, and joined by the Bugatti of Uatilla. But it's Heitinen into the first corner, followed by Peltonen, Nurmi, Uatilla, Withoft, Lazaro, La, Crozat, Smith, Tolnin and Jelly Moore. A little bit further back we've got Crozat being followed closely by Haley Smith in the Bingus 2 Evo. And Tolnin looking for a little bit of a way through, being followed by Jelly Moore. Moment Crozat feeling a bit of pressure as they go over the bumps, as Haley Smith starts to bear down in the Bugatti. Looks like Tolnin's got a bit of action here, side by side with Jaylee Muir, which is always a nerve-wracking place to be on a track this narrow. As they round up the final corner, it's Tolnin in P11. A little bit further up, you've got Uatilla and Withoft. Oh, sorry, I stand corrected. Korkiakowski just overtaking Tolnin there as well. But going back to Uatilla and P4, we've got Withoft 0.5 second behind. Lazaro also closing in a little bit there in the Maserati. As they slide over the bumps, you can see the cars really doing their best to absorb that punishment from the road. But Withoft and Lazaro holding on here as they close in behind Uatilla. little bit further back, we've got Haley Smith and Jay Lemure. Oh, but Lemure spins and hits the hay bales. Looks like Korkiakowski just narrowly avoids contact there with the spinning number 33. Now Lemure trying to get back on track. But they've got a rear right puncture, and that's a bit of bad news for Jay Lemure at the beginning of this race. Back to Uatilla and Withoft, and we've got a bit of action here. 0.3 of a second separating these two. Also joined by Al Lazaro. As the action continues to unfold. Oh, looks like Nermi's come into the pits. Potentially unintentional. And they're attempting to rejoin, but they do so right into the path of Jay Lemure, but that also takes out Crozet, so very questionable rejoin from Nermi there. And looks like Jay Lemure just getting back underway. Crozet currently struggling. I think they've got some kind of damage that's... Well, yeah, they've got a front right puncture by the looks of it. They're just trying to get off the track, potentially, just to stay safe and repair. Cleo overtakes. That front right wheel doesn't seem to be working properly. And, yeah, Crozet's steering seems to be... I think that's steering rack damage, because they just can't turn the car. This might mean that they're going to be attempting to get back with two front punctures and potentially damaged steering, and that's going to be quite a challenge, as you can see. Meanwhile, La and Nermi now 0.3 of a second apart. Nermi trying to make up some time now after their trip through the pits, and they get caught out with contact. Also taking a bit of a chunk out of La as La goes off the track and ends up in a wall. Meanwhile, at the front, Withoft, Uatilla and Lazaro's battle continues. Ooh, in the background, that's Lazaro into the trees. And they've got two front punctures, oh, and a rear puncture, and very damaged wheels. So that could be game over for Lazaro, at least until they repair the damage. Wow, it's definitely all kicking off here. Crozet is still attempting to drive. Let's see what things look like from their onboard point of view, and they are, ooh, getting turned around. So now they have to try and turn the car fully with no steering, which is going to be a real challenge for them, and to do that safely is going to be quite a challenge as well. They do run the risk of picking up some penalties or fines if they do cause an accident in the current situation that they find themselves in. So they're trying to time their turnaround here, but this is going to be very dangerous indeed. They've decided to make the move, and they've done so quite well actually. That was surprising. They are coming around now to the final corners, and I think they're trying to stay out of the way. Now into the final section. There's one of our flying arrows. That could be Pelton or Nurmi. And Crozet is almost there. And they find themselves finally back into the pit lane. So let's head back to some of the action with Hayley Smith and Korkiakowski. We've also got Uatilla and Nurmi starting to close in on one another. Korkiakowski shoots down the right hand side, overtaking Hayley Smith. Let's go and see how things look for Nurmi and Uatilla. Oh, I can hear someone in the woodland there by the sounds of it. Yep, it's Lazaro, still broken in the woodland there. Meanwhile, Nurmi and Uatilla going toe to toe. Looks like Nurmi's got the speed to go around the right hand side into T1, but that is going to be a potentially risky manoeuvre. Nurmi is definitely out for points today. The battle is definitely heating up between these two. And I think Jolly Muir's just been overtaken by, or just overtaken Cleo, sorry. But at the moment, Uatilla managing to hold off Nurmi for the time being. Now, I am seeing the clouds potentially start to appear and the track getting a little bit darker. That might be suggestive of weather. Nurmi tries again around the right-hand side into T1. This time manages to get there just ahead of Uatilla and makes that overtake work. And now I think they're going to be extending their lead. Eleven of the 50 laps already completed. I think now that Nurmi has got past Uatilla, the gap is just continuing to expand. However, it's Heitinen who's leading the race by a good margin, 8 seconds here, as they overtake some of the back markers now. That's Cleo in the Amel car. And now Tolnin in the number 27 is the next target for Heitinen. And there is the move on the inside as they come around the final corner. Nurmi now putting a bit of pressure onto Withoft here in P3 as they continue their charge back up the grid. Nurmi still bearing down on Withoft here, but currently the gap stands at 0.4 of a second. So Withoft and Nurmi still battling, but they're catching up with some of the traffic from further behind. So let's go on board with Nurmi and see how this looks. Number 38, that is La, just being overtaken there. Here's Cleo in the Amel car. Both Nurmi and Withoft to be cautious here. Such a narrow track to attempt to overtake on. So Nurmi and Withoft are through the traffic. But here comes Nurmi with the opportunity on the inside to overtake, and they do so into the final corner. That puts Nurmi back into P3. Running now behind Peltonen, their teammate. We've got Tolnen in the pit lane there. But it's Haitanen who's out in the front still, 12 seconds clear of even Peltonen. So that was Withoft just overtaking La in the Talbot there. They are going to be struggling to keep up with Nurmi, given how much Nurmi was able to catch up with Withoft in the first place. So, Haitanen leading the race still, holding that gap pretty steadily at 12 seconds to Peltonen. Lap 16 currently, so still a fair amount of racing to come, but at the moment it seems pretty solid, the gap. Meanwhile, Tolnen finds themselves going toe-to-toe with Jay Lemieux here, catching a little bit of curb there, but through the final corner, and it's Tolnen down to P10, with Lemieux going up to... Well, I stand corrected. Tolnen's managed to recoup the position, but they've got Cleo right in the mix here as they try and go through their first corner there, battling all the way. And it's Lemieux now trying to find a way past Tolnen, but seemingly unable to do so for the time being. And you can see Lemieux yeah, Lemieux still hanging on there. 0.4 of a second gap between the two of them. But Lemure, once again, on the inside, manages to sneak through, overtaking Tolnin into P9. And now Tolnin has got to try and find some way to fight back, but they do have a bit of pressure now coming in from a car attempting to lap them, which I believe is Heitinen, and it is. Tolnin manages to let them through without too much drama. Colin sliding the car through the final corner there, bringing lap 19 to a close. We do have a bit of pressure there from what looks like Uatilla. No, sorry, I stand corrected. That is going to be Korkiakowski. Of course, that's not for position. Further up, we've got Heitinen, who's still leading the race. They have a 10.5 second gap to Peltonen, which is ever so slightly smaller than it was previously. It looks like Peltonen is starting to make small inroads into closing this gap, but saying that, the gap's just got quite large actually, so it's suggestive of traffic holding Peltonen back at this point, and there seems to be a little bit of that going on, with Korkiakowski just in the mix here. So we're approaching the halfway point of this race. 20 laps completed so far. 25 will mark the halfway point. And it hasn't been short of action, that's for sure. We've got La and Lemure just closing in this gap. Looks like La's got the straight line speed here in the Alpha, but Lemure might find an opportunity in the corners. And they're already closing in relatively rapidly. Only a good bit of acceleration on the Delage. And there's the overtake. La has dropped down to P9 with Lemure up to P8. The bumps do certainly seem to unsettle the cars a little bit, and you can see Lemure catching a few of those bumps as they come up and over the hill. Meanwhile, our race leader is now 18 seconds clear of Peltonen. So that's suggestive of Peltonen having been either caught up in some significant traffic, or they've had a little bit of an issue themselves. Nurmi has closed in about 4 or 5 seconds there, so it does seem like Heitonen's just managed to open up a gap to both of them, to be honest. And we're almost at that halfway point. 23 laps, 25 will be that halfway point. We haven't seen any bad weather yet. There was a suggestion of rain for the first half of the main race, and we haven't seen that yet, so I think the weather was supposed to stabilise towards the second half of the race, and that seems to be the case as the skies got a little bit bluer. I don't see any clouds in the sky. There were some clouds earlier on, but fortunately it didn't result in any rain, and that's probably good news for the drivers here. Korkiakowski is in the pits, however, and I was just about to start talking about whether pit stops would be required. This might be a fuel stop or a tyre stop, I'm not entirely sure, but that allows Hayley Smith in the Bingus 2 Evo to get through. In fact, Korkiakowski's probably in for some kind of mechanical issue, I'd imagine. However, if we do start to see other drivers pitting, that may suggest a one-stop strategy is being used by most drivers here. Jelly Muir overtaking Korkiakowski there, as does La. Ooh, and La has just hit a tree. Make that 2. And they've got a front left puncture and probably some significant damage to the front end after that kind of a crash. Hitting a tree followed by a second tree is never going to go well from a mechanical point of view. And oh, there's Lemieux reversing onto the track. And that caused a bit of contact there with Korkiakowski, which hopefully hasn't resulted in any damage for either party. Here comes Heitonen. So I stand corrected, that was Withoft, who isn't racing Lemieux for position, but will be very cautious of contact, having just witnessed what's happened ahead of them. Meanwhile, Korkiakowski and Tolnin once again locked in a battle of Bugattis here. Korkiakowski seems to have the straight line speed advantage though, and Tolnin drops down to P8. Korkiakowski back up to P7. So La is still crashed out. Cleo is still driving, no issues there, but yeah, La still waiting for that damage to be repaired. Meanwhile, Nurmi is steadily closing in on Peltonen. We're just observing Peltonen here, but Nurmi is now only 4 seconds behind. That was at least 7 a few minutes ago, and more like 11 seconds a few laps before that. So Nurmi's definitely closing this gap a little bit at a time. Meanwhile, Peltonen 22 seconds behind Heitonen at this point in time, and that's going to be a big gap to close. Especially now that we're over halfway through the race, 27 laps completed. And it's only a minute a lap, so with a 24-second gap, or 27-second gap to close, that's going to have to be some very, very rapid driving on the part of Marcus Peltonen here. So Lemieux has pitted. I don't know if they reverted to pits and then drove out again, in which case that would be a DNF. or if they nurse the car back. So actually, no, I'm standing corrected. La is the one who's had the issue here. But I think Lemure was just a little bit of a stop and go. But here we are with Peltonen. Nurmi 3.2 seconds behind, just shaving that down to 3.1 currently. And you can see now Nurmi just starting to appear in the background of the camera shots. They're definitely closing in on Peltonen. So I think this means Peltonen's got some kind of issue, because they're losing a lot of time to Heiterman, and they're not necessarily keeping their own teammates at bay when they normally are very consistent in their spacing. So this is suggestive of some kind of mechanical issue, or potentially helping the engine to run cooler by changing the fuel mix. Whatever it is, it's causing a performance impact to Peltonen, and that's allowing their teammate Nurmi to close this gap. Pelton has just got round Hayley Smith there. Nurmi next up to do the same. So Korkiakowski back in the pits. Quite a bumpy car. Let's go back to Peltonen though, where they're now only 1.3 seconds ahead of Nurmi. I suspect this is where the next battle is going to unfold, and of course, as much as they might be teammates, Nurmi is going to be seeing this as an opportunity to overtake, so hopefully they can do so without causing any issue, because it would be a shame if both teammates were taken out. But it is a narrow track and there's not very much room for overtaking a lot of the time. I could hear Korkiakowski, but I must be hearing someone else. So, sub 1 second gap between Nurmi and Peltonen now. Gap slightly widening there, with Nurmi just falling back to 1.2 seconds. Definitely here. Is that La still? Yeah, La's quite damaged. Having just got out of the trees, I think they're now experiencing some damage elsewhere on the track. We'll just be waiting for their moment. Yeah, they got steering damage, that's for sure. Meanwhile, Peltonen now overtaking Clio in the Amel car. Nurmi 0.5 of a second now between these two, so not very much in it. And I suspect we're going to see a little bit of a battle unfold here Although potentially it could be a team orders situation, and there might be a opening of a door to let Nermi through. Now, La is somewhere around here. And both Pelton and Nermi will have to be very cautious of that. The Nermi's getting close, but then every time they get within striking distance, they seem to fall back a little bit. So whatever was holding Pelton back seems to no longer be holding Pelton back. But Nermi does seem to get a little bit closer here and there, but then over the main start-finish straight, they seem to fall back a little bit again. Lazaro has unfortunately retired to the pits. Suggestive of their damage being unable to be recovered from earlier on. Ooh, and there's... that was La in the middle of the track. And that's meant that Nermi's gone off the track, as has Tolnin. And I suggest that might mean Nermi is going to have to go into the pits unless they've managed to avoid any damage. Let's see what they do. Aitonen's into the pits, so will we see Nermi do the same? No, so they miraculously avoided any issues there, which is quite something. But with Heitonen in the pit lane, facing the wrong way as well, that suggests they've had a crash. It means that Nermi and Pelton are now race leaders here. Well, that was certainly an interesting pit strategy there from Heitonen. And they've also got Uatilla only 12 seconds behind. Interestingly, it's saying that Heitonen's one lap down from Nermi and Pelton now. Meanwhile, Pelton continues to lead with without too much issue. Nermi having amazingly avoided significant damage in that incident earlier on by avoiding Withoft, I think that was. They've got a 9-second gap to close, having just closed a significant gap previously, and now only have a limited number of laps left to close this 9-second gap to Pelton. So side by side, Aitanen and Nurmi. No contact, thankfully. In the background you can see Ledoux's Talbot. It looks like La is in the pits but hasn't retired. Lazaro has retired, unfortunately. Korkiakowski also retired, and is that Haley Smith's Bingus? No, it's not, thankfully. We're down a few drivers, but not out yet. This must be quite a fatiguing race for these drivers to manage these cars, especially the Alphas, which are quite tail happy. But to manage them around this track without making contact with other drivers or the environment for 50 laps is yeah, quite a tall order. So I imagine I would be feeling quite tired by about this point, and the risk of a mistake creeping in will probably be becoming more and more of a reality. So Withoft finds themselves in a misfortunate situation once again. Significant front end damage, and both front wheels are burst, which is not good news. Meanwhile, Nurmi has closed the gap to Peltonen to 6 seconds. We've also got Uatilla and Jaylee Muir separated by only a few seconds now. Ledoux is in the pits with the Talbot, looking like they're repairing their front wheel. Leo still going strong in P9. So Uatilla can breathe easier now because Jay Lemieux seems to have picked up a rear left puncture, which is unfortunate because they were closing in quite significantly on Uatilla. That was Rosette, if I'm not mistaken. Meanwhile, we've got Marcus Peltonen leading by 3.5 seconds. Trying to get round Jay Lemieux there. That's also Heitinen in the mix here, but they are not racing for position currently. They're separated by about a lap, I believe. But they are racing in very close proximity at this stage, and that could always introduce the risk of contact. But thankfully, Heitinen has been let through, and that leaves Marcus Peltonen relatively safe for the time being. Track conditions have now hit 100%, and they are now optimal. We've got 30 degrees track temperatures as well, so that should be good for the tyres. And here's Binger's 2 Evo, driven by Haley Smith, separating Peltonen from Heitinen. Now it's Nurmi only 0.5 of a second behind Peltonen. So the battle is back on for the lead, with a mere 7 laps to go. Peltonen shoots around Haley Smith. Nurmi 0.5 of a second behind, also does the same. And at the same time we've got Tolnin and Lemieux with the Delage, number 33, shooting around the right hand side of Tolnin and down into T1, but Tolnin actually closes the door and manages to hold on to the position for the time being. The gap stays at 0.2 seconds, however. Ooh, but Tolnin overcooks it, and that allows Lemieux through. So our race leader Peltonen now 5 laps to go. Can they hold Nurmi at bay for the remainder of this race? Ooh, there was Withoft rejoining the track. They are very much in dire straits there with their the car's just not going to be turning very well with those kind of wheels, is it? Meanwhile, Peltonen 0.4 of a second gap to Nurmi. Presently, probably feeling a little bit of pressure at this stage as the tyres and the fuel burning off. Car's feeling a little bit different here. They've got a rear view mirror full of Nurmi, and they've only got 5 laps left to go in this race. Nurmi's obviously come back multiple times now in this race from further back to get to this position, so they definitely have the pace to overtake Marcus Peltonen and take the race win. The question is, when will this happen? And if? There's Withoft, thankfully not causing an issue for our race leaders coming through. But what an exciting way to round up this race. 4 more laps to go. And the battle at the front is separated by a mere 0.6 of a second at this stage. It is getting a little bit darker. The sky is changing slightly. I don't think there's going to be any rain yet, though. I thought the risk of rain was at the earlier start of this race, not towards the end. So I think we should be in a pretty good position at this point in time. Ooh, and Withoft still having an issue there, but we've also got... Ooh, wow, Uatilla. Where are you? I don't know what happened to Uatilla there, but they were momentarily going to the moon. And here comes Pelton and Nurmi, though. So Uatilla, I think, is unfortunately out of the race, but there's only 2 laps left to go, so they might have a chance of holding on to their P7 position if Pelton and Nurmi finish the race. And Uatilla hasn't lost their position from being lapped. So lap 49. Battle at the front got a little bit further apart, but remains close nonetheless. There's Withoft once again. Down in P10. And the last lap has indeed begun here. 1 second separating the 2 leaders now. Nurmi getting a little bit caught up behind Ledoux's Talbot there, and that's opening the gap a little bit further. They've snuck through, however. But I'm not sure if Nurmi's going to be closing this gap before the race is over. Withoft once again proving to be a mobile chicane at this stage. Uatilla's dropped down to P8 with Clio having overtaken. But we're just coming up to the final corner of the final lap, and it's Peltonen followed by Nurmi. And there we have it. Peltonen wins the race. Nurmi in P2. Heitinen on track for a P3. The Dew has picked up P9. Crozat picks up... Yeah, we're just going to have to go to check this out. Withoft is currently reversing up a hill with 2 very broken front wheels. They seem to have found a technique which works for them. But Heidtnen is about to finish the race in P3. Just rounding the final corner. And there we have it. Hayley Smith picks up P4 in the Bingus 2 Evo. Jaylee Muir picks up P5. Tolnin grabs P6. Cleo, a strong finish actually for the ML car, P7. Uratilla technically P8. Ledoux is in P9. And Withoft is still going. Going off track into a ditch. Which is not ideal, but I think they've now completed the reversing stage of this manoeuvre. Look at those front wheels, they're just... Oh god, I mean, it's just not ideal, is it? And here's the smoke screen. Driven by Withoft, the number 38 special. Bringing it home to a glorious P10 finish. And across the line for Withoft. Well, that concludes our racing here. Round 14. It's come to an end. A little bit of a different format, and actually quite an enjoyable track car combination here with some very interesting racing on the challenging track. But congratulations to Marcus Peltonen, Naomi and Heitnen for your podium finishes. And thank you again for everyone in chat for your kind words and being part of the experience. Hope you've all enjoyed yourself, and I shall sign off the stream. I've been Pyro Laserbeam, and I'll catch you on the next CVR race next month.